archaic translation by H. T. Francis. Source. Adapted from archaic translation by H. T. Francis. Jakata number 532. Sona-nanda-jataka. Angel or musician god, etc. This was a story told by the master, while living at Jetavana monastery, about a brother who supported his mother. The circumstance which led up to it was the same as that told in the Sama birth. But on this occasion the master said, "Brethren, do not take offence at this brother." Sages of old, though they were offered rule over all India, refused to accept it and supported their parents. And so saying he told a story of the past. Once upon a time the city of Benares was known as Brahmavadana. At that time a king named Manoja reigned there, and a certain Brahmin magnate, possessed of 80 crores, had no heir, and his Brahmin wife at the asking of her lord prayed for a son. Then the bodhisattva passing from the Brahma world was conceived in her womb, and at his birth they called him young Sana. By the time that he could run alone, another being left the Brahma world and he too was conceived by her, and when he was born they called him young Nanda. As soon as they had been taught the Vedas and had attained proficiency in the liberal arts, the Brahmin, observing how handsome the boys were, addressing his wife said, "Lady, we will unite our son, the youthful Sana, in the bonds of wedlock." She readily agreed and reported the matter to her son. He said, "I have quite enough of the household life as it is. So long as you live, I will watch over you, and on your death I will withdraw to the Himalayas and become an ascetic." She repeated this to the Brahmin. And when they had spoken to him again and again but had failed to persuade him, they addressed themselves to the young Nanda, saying, "Dear son, do you set up an establishment?" He answered, "I will not pick up what my brother has rejected, as if it were a lump of phlegm. I too on your death will together with my brother join the ascetics." The parents thought, if they, though they are quite young, thus give up the lusts of the flesh, how much more should all of us adopt the ascetic life, and they said, "Dear son, why talk of becoming ascetic when we are dead? We will all take the vows." And telling their purpose to the king they disposed of all their wealth in the way of charity, making freedmen of their slaves and distributing what was right and proper amongst their family. And then all four of them setting on from the city of Brahmavadana. They built them a hermitage in the Himalaya region in a pleasant grove, near a lake covered by the 5 kinds of lotus, and there they lived as ascetics. The 2 brothers watched over their parents. And early in the morning they bring them pieces of stick to brush their teeth and water to rinse their mouth. They sweep out the hut, cell and all. Supply them with water to drink. Bring them sweet berries from the wood to eat, provide them with hot or cold water for the bath, dress their matted locks, shampooing their feet and rendering them all similar services. As time thus passed on, the sage Nanda thought, "I shall have to provide all kinds of fruit as food for my father and mother." So whatever ordinary fruit he had gathered on the spot either yesterday or even the day before that, he would bring in the early morning and give to his parents to eat. They ate it and after rinsing their mouth they observed a fast. But the wise Sana went a long distance and gathered sweet and ripe fruit and offered it to them. Then they said, "Dear son, we ate early this morning what your younger brother brought us and we are now fasting. We have no need of this fruit now." So his fruit was not eaten but was all wasted, and the next day and so on it was just the same. And thus through his possession of the 5 supernatural faculties he travelled a great distance to fetch fruit, but they refused to eat it. Then the great being thought, "My father and mother are very delicate, and Nanda brings all sorts of unripe or half-ripe fruit for them to eat, and this being so, they will not live long. I will stop him from doing this." So addressing him he said, "Nanda, from now on when you bring them fruit, you are to wait till I come. And we will both of us at the same time supply them with food." Though he was thus spoken to, desiring merit for himself only, Nanda paid no attention to his brother's words. The great being thought, "Nanda acts improperly in disobeying me. I will send him away." Then thinking he would watch over his parents by himself, he said, "Nanda, you are past teaching and pay no attention to the words of the wise. I am the elder. My father and mother are my charge. I alone will watch over them. You cannot stay on here. Get you gone elsewhere," and he snapped his fingers at him. After being thus dismissed, Nanda could no longer remain in his brother's presence, and asking him farewell he came near to his parents and told them what had happened. Then retiring into his hut of leaves, he fixed his gaze on the mystic circle, and that very day he developed the 5 supernatural faculties and the 8 attainments. And he thought, I can fetch precious sand from the foot of Mount Sinaru, and sprinkling it in the cell of my brother's hut I can ask his forgiveness. And should he not even so be pacified, I will fetch water from Lake Anotatta and ask him to forgive me. And should he not even thus be pacified, supposing my brother should not pardon me for the sake of angelic beings, I would bring the 4 great kings and Saka and ask his forgiveness. And should he still not be pacified, I would bring the chief king in all India, Manoja, and the rest of the kings and beg him to pardon me. And this being so, the fame of my brother's virtue would be spread throughout India and would be blazed abroad as the sun and moon. Meanwhile by his magic power he descended in the city of Brahmavadana at the door of the king's palace, and sent a message to the king, saying, a certain ascetic wishes to see you. The king said, what has an ascetic to do with seeing me? He must have come for some food. He sent him rice, but he would have none of it. Then he sent husked rice and garments and roots, but he would have none of them. At last he sent a messenger to ask why he had come, and in answer to the messenger he said, I am come to serve the king. The king, on hearing this, sent back word, I have plenty of servants, ask him to do his duty as an ascetic. On hearing this he said, by my own power I will get the power of governing over all India, and give it to your king. The king when he heard this thought, ascetics, truly, are wise. They certainly know some clever tricks. Then he summoned him to his presence, assigned him a seat and saluting him asked, Holy Sir, will you, as they tell us, gain the rule over all India and grant it to me? Yes, sire. How will you manage it? Sire. Without shedding the blood of anyone. No, not even so much as a tiny fly would drink, and without wasting your treasure, by my own magic power will I gain the power of governing and make it over to you. Only, without a moment's delay, you must swiftly move on this very day. The king believed his words and set out, escorted by an army corps. If it was hot for the army, the sage Nanda by his magic created a shade and made it cool. If it rained, he did not allow the rain to fall upon the army. He kept off a hot wind. He did away with stumps and thorns in the road and every kind of danger. He made the road as level as the circle used in the kasana rite, and spreading a skin he sat cross-legged upon it in the air, and so moved in front of the army. Thus first of all he came with his army to the Kosala kingdom. And, pitching his camp near the city, he sent a message to the king of Kosala, asking him either give battle or yield himself to his power. The king was enraged and said, What then, am I not a king? I will fight you. And he swiftly moved on at the head of his forces, and the 2 armies engaged in battle. The sage Nanda, spreading out wide the antelope skin on which he sat between the 2 armies, caught up with it all the arrows shot by the combatants on both sides. And in neither army was there a single soldier wounded by a shaft, and, when all the arrows in their possession were spent, both armies stood helpless. And sage Nanda went to the Kosala king and reassured him, saying, Great king, be not dismayed. There is no danger threatening you. The kingdom shall still be yours. Only submit to King Manoja. He believed what Nanda said and agreed to do so. Then conducting him into the presence of Manoja, Nanda said, The king of Kosala submits to you, sire. Let the kingdom still remain his. Manoja readily agreed and receiving his submission, he marched with the 2 armies to the kingdom of Anga and took Anga. And then he took Magadha in the kingdom of that name. And by these means he made himself master of the kings of all India, and accompanied by them he marched straight back to the city of Brahmavadana. Now he was 7 years. 7 months. And 7 days in taking the kingdoms of all these kings. And from each royal city he caused to be brought all manner of food, both hard and soft, and taking the kings, 101 in number, for 7 days he held a great carouse with them. The sage Nanda thought, I will not show myself to the king until he has enjoyed the pleasures of power of governing for 7 days. And going his rounds for alms in the country of the northern Kurus, he dwelling for the space of 7 days in the Himalayas, at the entrance of the golden cave. And Manoja on the 7th day, after contemplating his great majesty and might, thought, this glory was not given me by my father and mother nor by anyone else. It originated through the ascetic Nanda, and surely it is now 7 days since I set eyes on him. Where in the world can be the friend that gave me this glory? And he called to mind sage Nanda. And he, knowing that he was remembered, came and stood before him in the air. The king thought, I do not know whether this ascetic is a man or a deity. If he be a man, I will give him the power of governing over all India, but if he be a divinity, I will pay him the honor due to a god, and to prove him he spoke the first stanza. Angel or musician god are you, or do we by chance see? Saka, to cities generous, or mortal born may be. With magic powers gifted. Your name we gladly would learn from you. On hearing his words Nanda in stating his nature repeated a second stanza. No angel I, no musician god, nor Saka do you see. A mortal I with magic powers. The truth I tell to you. The king, on hearing this, thought, he says he is a human being. Even so he has been useful to me. I will satisfy him with the great honor I pay him, and he said. Great service you have brought for us, beyond all words to tell. Midst floods of rain no single drop upon us ever fell. Cool shade you did create for us, when parching winds arose. From deadly shaft you did us shield, amidst our countless enemies. Next many a happy realm you made own me as sovereign lord. Over 100 kings became obedient to our word. What from our treasures you shall choose, we cheerfully leave. Cars yoked to horses or elephants, or nymphs dressed so fine. Or if a lovely palace be your choice, it shall be yours. In Anga realms or Magadha if you are glad to live. Would rule Avanti, Asaka this too we gladly give. Yes even the half of all our realm we cheerfully leave. Say but the word, what you would have, at once it shall be yours. Hearing this, sage Nanda, explaining his wishes, said. No kingdom do I crave, nor any town or land. Nor do I seek to win great riches at our hand. But if you have any affection for me, he said, do my asking in this one thing. Beneath your sovereign sway my aged parents dwell. Enjoying holy calm in some lone woodland cell. With these old sages I'm allowed no merit to acquire. If you and yours would plead my cause, Sana would cease his anger. Then the king said to him. Gladly in this will I perform, O Brahmin your behest. But who are they that I should take to further your request? The sage Nanda said. More than 100 householders, rich Brahmins too I name. And all these mighty warrior chiefs of noble birth and fame. With King Manoja, are enough to satisfy my claim. Then the king said. Go, harness horses and elephants and yoke them to the chariot. Go, throw my banners to the wind, from carriage pole and bar. I go to seek where Kosaya, the hermit, dwells afar. Equipped then with his 4 times army the king marched out to seek where he did dwell in charming cell, a hermit mild and meek. These verses were inspired by perfect wisdom. Now on the day on which the king reached the hermitage, the sage Sana thought. It is now more than 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days since my young brother went on from us. Where can he possibly be now? And looking with the divine eye he saw him and said to himself, he is coming with 101 kings and an escort of 24 legions to beg my pardon. These kings and their group of attendants have seen many marvelous things done by my young brother. And being ignorant of my supernatural power they say of me, this false ascetic overestimates his power and measures himself with our Lord. By such boasting they will become destined to hell. I will give them a specimen of my magic working powers. And placing a carrying pole in the air, not touching his shoulder by an interval of 4 inches, he thus travelled in space, passing close by the king, to fetch water from Lake Anotatta. But the sage Nanda, when he saw him coming, had not the courage to show himself, but, disappearing on the spot where he was sitting, he escaped and hid himself in the Himalayas. However, King Manoja, when he saw Sona approaching in the attractive guise of an ascetic, spoke this stanza. Who goes to fetch him water through the air at such a pace? With wooden pole not touching him by quite 4 inches space? The great being, being thus addressed, spoke a couple of stanzas. I'm Sona. From ascetic rule I never go astray. My parents I unweariedly support by night and day. Berries and roots as food for them I gather in the wood. Ever recalling to my mind how they once brought me good. Hearing this, the king wishing to make friends with him, spoke another stanza. We gladly would reach the hermitage where Khuddaka did dwell. Show us the road, good Sona, which will lead us to his cell. Then the great being by his supernatural power created a footpath leading to the hermitage and spoke this stanza. This is the path. Know well, O king, the clump of sombre green. There midst a grove of ebon trees the hermitage is seen. Thus did the mighty sage instruct these warrior kings, and then once more he travelled through the air and hurried home again. Next, having swept the hermitage, he looked for his sire's retreat. And waking up the aged saint, he offered him a seat. Come on, he cried, O holy sage, be seated here, I request, for high-born kings of mighty fame will pass along this way. The old man, having heard his son his presence thus implore, came on in haste from out his hut and sat him by the door. These verses were inspired by perfect wisdom. And the sage Nanda came to the king at the very moment when the bodhisattva reached the hermitage, bringing with him water from Anotatta, and Nanda pitched their camp not far from the hermitage. Then the king bathed and dressed himself in all his splendour. And, escorted by 101 kings, he came with the sage Nanda in great state and glory and entered the hermitage, to beg the bodhisattva to forgive his brother. Then the father of the bodhisattva, on seeing the king approach them, inquired of the bodhisattva, and he explained the matter to him. The master, in making this clear, said. On seeing him all in a blaze of glory standing near, surrounded by a band of kings, thus spoke the aged seer. Who marches here with tabor, conch, and beat of sounding drums? Music to cheer the heart of kings? Who here in triumph comes? Who in this blaze of glory comes, with turban cloth of gold? As lightning bright, an arrow case armed, a hero young and bold? Who comes all bright and glorious, with face of golden sheen? Like embers of acacia wood, aglow in furnace seen? Who comes with his umbrella held high up in such a way that it with ribs so clearly marked wards off the sun's fierce ray? Who is it, with a yak-tail fan stretched on to guard his side, is seen, like some wise sage, on back of elephant to ride? Who comes in pomp and majesty of parachutes all white, and armor-clad horses of noble strain, encircling left and right? Who here comes, surrounded by 100 kings or more? An escort of right noble kings, behind him and before? With elephants, with chariots, and with horse and foot brigade? Who comes with all the pomp of war, in 4 times army dressed? Who comes with all the legions vast that follow in his path? Unbroken, limitless as are the waves of the seas? It is Manoja, king of kings, with Nanda here has come. As though it was Indra, lord of heaven, to this our hermit home. His is the mighty army that comes, obedient in his following. Unbroken, limitless as are the waves of the seas. The master said. In robe of finest silk dressed, with sandal oil moistened, these kings approach the saintly men in pleading attitude. Then King Manoja with a salutation took his seat apart, and, exchanging friendly greetings, spoke a couple of stanzas. O holy men, we trust that you are prosperous and well, with grain to collect and roots and fruit abundant where you dwell. Have you been much by flies and gnats and creeping things annoyed? Or from wild beasts of prey have you immunity enjoyed?